Welcome to my reading today. I haven't done one in a while, and I just recently realized that I hadn't done one yet for the Lilac City series. I thought I would start out by telling you a little bit about this story. It's about three sisters, Maud, Doris, and Frances, whose father dies suddenly, and they're put in the care of their nefarious uncle. He arranges marriages for them, even though Frances is only 18, Doris is 19, and Maud is 20. They decide, rather than be forced into these marriages, it's set in 1905, that they'll follow their younger sister's suggestion and run away to Wyoming to their older half-brother, who was estranged from their father, and started a dude ranch. His name is Luke Hamblin, and this is the third book in the series. It's on special at this time because it's set during the Christmas period, and the book is called A Lady for Luke. So this is kind of a sidestep. All four books deal with the four siblings who find their love stories. What I'm going to do, since A Lady for Luke is free today only, so grab it while you can, I'm going to read you the epilogue from the book prior to it, A Dandy for Doris, because it's from the point of view of the female love interest in A Lady for Luke. So here is the epilogue. Do you, Marshall Emerson Breckenridge, take Doris Lancaster to be your lawful wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better and for worse, for richer and for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part? Reverend Pierce asked. I do. Marshall's words were both firm and tender as he met Doris's gaze. Now, just an aside, Marshall is Judith's brother. Judith is the female love interest. Judith found her eyes stinging again. She'd worked so hard to remove herself from all the romance nonsense. When she joined her brother and left behind the nightmare that her life had become, she'd convinced herself there was no such thing as love. She should know. When Teddy had broken off their engagement without even a glance back, Judith had been forced to recognize that all illusions of love were a sham, just like her parents' marriage. And then Doris had stepped into Marshall's life. How had her brother managed to find love twice, and she not once? Life seemed so unfair. I do, Doris said, pulling Judith from her negative thoughts. The young woman said the two simple words with so much love, Judith had to wipe her eyes. Her handkerchief was a sodden mess. I now pronounce you husband and wife. Reverend Pierce smiled. You may kiss the bride. Judith raised her brows at the deviation from the declaration as Marshall gave Doris a tender kiss. Her sister must have won the argument with the minister. Frances had insisted Marshall was already a man and didn't need anyone to pronounce him one during the wedding ceremony. Frances is a spitfire. She'd declared he should be pronounced a husband to match Doris becoming a bride. The couple turned and, hand in hand, strolled to the back of the church. Both of their faces were alight with happiness. For the first time since Teddy had walked away, a little piece of the wall Judith had built around her heart broke off. She rose with the other guests, surprised to find her spirits lifted. Love might not be something she would ever find, but the world somehow seemed a brighter place knowing it did exist. It went well, I think, Luke said from behind her. I appreciate all the work you and the folks at the Circle B have put into it this week. Thank you. Judith glanced up, suddenly aware of his height. He was probably a little taller than Marshall, and she'd already thought he was tall. It was our pleasure, she said, surprised to mean it. In New York, Judith had never had to work. That was what servants had been for. Her brother still had some, but he called them employees. All week she'd labored alongside the Lancaster sisters and both of the ranch housekeepers to prepare for the wedding work. It was becoming a regular occurrence for Judith. Part of her resented it. She was a lady, a Breckenridge of New York, or she had been. Luke gave her shoulder a quick pat before moving through the chatting guests to congratulate the new couple. With a sigh, she followed him. Now there's a scene break. Judith stood with Florence and Lydia in the parlor of the Circleby Ranch as Marshall drove off with his new wife for their honeymoon trip. When he'd married Agnes, Judith had been off at school. Their father had chosen not to bring her home for the visit following their wedding. If Judith could have chosen a sister, it'd be Doris Lancaster, Doris Breckenridge. Why did Judith feel unsettled now her brother had married again? Surely she wasn't so petty as to resent their obvious happiness. She'd pushed him to do it, after all. In the last year, she'd been so many things, most of them unpleasant and unhappy. She brushed aside the hair from her nieces' faces. Judith regretted having missed being here with them all these years. She should have come to help Marshall when Agnes had died. Instead of assisting her brother in his time of need, Judith had selfishly stayed home where she could attend balls and flirt and make an advantageous marriage. She thought she had. Well, she hadn't loved Teddy. She'd been fond of him, and she'd thought he was fond of her. It appeared that hadn't been enough. What he'd valued was her fortune and his precious reputation. He hadn't shown the least regret when he'd broken off their engagement. If anything, he'd treated her as though she had leprosy, and he might catch her dishonor merely by being in her company. Judith shook her head. It was all in the past. "I suppose we should finish cleaning up," she said to the girls. "I thought when Miss Doris married Daddy that she would live here with us," Lydia said, her little voice sad. "I told you they will," Florence said, with a haughty sniff, which sounded too much like Judith. "I told you before. They're only going on their honeymoon trip." "But I miss them already," Lydia whined. "You're just tired." Judith picked her up. "It's been a long day following a busy week." "When are you going to get married?" Florence slid her hand into Judith's. What man would ever look at her and not see the daughter of a convicted felon? "I think I'll just be your spinster aunt and keep driving you to and from school." "I'm sure you're nice enough now to catch a husband," Lydia said, blind to the sting of her words. "You're not nearly so cross as you used to be." "I was cross. I'm sorry." What a wretch Judith had been to treat two motherless girls in such a way. It was just one more sign she'd inherited her father's flawed blood. At a knock on the parlor door, she turned. Luke Hamblin peeked in. "I just wanted to let you know we've finished cleaning up." "What?" Judith set Lydia down and hurried toward him. "I didn't mean to leave all that for your people." "It was our responsibility as the bride's family." He shrugged. "If the wedding had been held at the Lucky L like it should have been, we'd have cleaned up anyway." "Well, thank you. I'm sure Mrs. Hauser's relieved." Judith glanced into the hallway where the others had gathered. She had a difficult time understanding how easily the three sisters had blended into Mr. Hamblin's household. "I understand from her you did quite a bit of the work on this." He extended her hand to her. "Doris has become a dear friend." Judith took it, meeting his gaze. In spite of the long day, she caught a hint of his shaving soap. She was used to the smell of leather on the men around her, but Luke's musky scent brought unexpected warmth to her face. A powerful awareness struck her and made her wonder what it would be like to kiss him. Luke leaned closer and her pulse quickened. "And now you're my sister, too," he said. Judith felt like someone had thrown a pail of cold water on her. She released his hand and stepped back beside the girls. "Thank you again, Mr. Hamblin," she said. "Please, call me Luke. We're family now." He turned to the others and asked, "Is everyone ready to go?" The Lancaster guests offered their farewells and left the house. An odd sense of loss accompanied their departure, and Judith's chest felt tight. She cleared her throat. "Girls, can you check to see if Mrs. Hauser needs any help?" Judith asked. They skipped away, and she stepped onto the porch, watching as Luke took his place on his surrey. The wind had kicked up, bringing a chill with it. She wished she'd put on a shawl. The Indian summer they'd been blessed with was ending, and the crops were nearly all in now. Winter would come soon. Luke glanced back and met her gaze, raising his hand in farewell. The earlier warmth flushed through her again. She told her foolish heart to go back to sleep. He'd called her his sister. With an answering wave, Judith turned to go back into the house. Thank you for listening.